Hello, this is the first instructional video for social media course Marketing 242 at Bellevue College. This is Professor Rex Babish, but please feel comfortable calling me Rex. The slide here is for those of you who did not take advertising or digital marketing already, would be a great link for you to follow. I have posted it along with this video. It's hard to see the URL on the slide, but you will see it posted along with this video's the assignment description. To link to this video if you want to review digital marketing, which began in the with the advent of the internet and emailing, has now grown quite substantially, and it is consuming much more of a company's budgets. And then the thing to understand with this course is how social media evolved into being part of the strategy. And we are now seeing social media subsume most of the advertising budgets for companies, which is again a change from how things originally began. But as you all may well understand, the idea of advertising without engaging with social media in this day and age is probably not the best strategy for any company, big or small. So overall, a company's revenue is generally reserved for 10% of it to be planned for marketing initiatives and marketing campaigns. Of that budget, about 25% goes towards digital marketing, and that's increasing. Actually, it's probably substantially more for some companies. And then within that, the social media expenditure is rapidly growing, and the amount in which the spending for social media has grown is exponentially increasing every year. So as you can see, all the different platforms emerging and the connectivity between all of them, it provides endless amounts of product placement and or advertising for any company. Social media is becoming increasingly more useful to companies because it allows companies to really know and understand at what point their consumers are in the purchasing funnel, or what stage of the buying process are they in. Are they just doing research and considering a brand? Well, a lot of times you can, by looking at the context of their visits within social media or even their discussions, you really can assess where in the funnel they are. And also, companies now have access to enough information to allow them to know that many of which one of their potential target audience is actually ready to buy, and that is invaluable information. That is increasing your likelihood that your marketing dollars are going to pay off, and so companies are very thirsty for good information in this respect. Lastly, customers who have purchased your product may stay in your loyalty loop by further engaging them, making sure they're satisfied with the product, or building up the brand, or extending their commitment to the brand through new product offerings. And just to remember to go back to the basics, one thing about marketing that hasn't changed is the marketing mix, really knowing how to put in front of your consumer the right product at the right time, that it's available for people at the right price, and that you're promoting it in a way where they know how to go and obtain it. Still requires you to engage in an integrated marketing plan in which you have to do a situation analysis. What's the history of your brand? Who are your competitors? What does the competitive landscape or legal or regulatory landscape look like? Are there climate issues? All of these things still impact on marketing plans to a great degree. And also, you're creating objectives and marketing strategies. So what are your marketing objectives, and what strategies do you use to complete those, and what are the individual tactics that comprise your strategies? And finally, always, how are we measuring how our marketing dollars are paying off, which is an art with some science in it. We can never know for sure if our marketing efforts are producing the effects we want them to, but we also know and are very clear that doing no marketing doesn't work. So our industry, marketing industry, definitely has blind spots still, but with social media and technology improving and our measures improving, those darker spots are getting less unclear. And so helping companies know how to get to the right consumer at the right time, our ability to do that has increased, but we also now have more measures to know how our marketing dollars are paying off. Social media has many different types of measures, so those will be subjects of your reading and course materials as well. Another quick reminder, very important to know, especially when we're talking about social media, and part of your marketing strategy is to understand the difference between paid, owned, and earned media. Paid media are those things that you pay for as a company. You will place an ad somewhere on some platform and pay for it. Owned is any asset you own where you can upload your own content to it, create your own brand identity, and it's not paid for, but it is something you can leverage into paid media. And finally, what many companies are always trying to produce is earned media, or the impressions. How do they get through paid and owned media their future customers or target audience to talk about their product, engage with it? This is earned because it's not something you can plan for exactly. You try to create sort of a viral campaign, but mostly if you walk into a company, whether you're on the client side or an agency side, and you say, oh, we're going to create an earned media campaign, you might be laughed out of the room because these things never are certain. So you have to do your best to create an interesting campaign, tell a strong story, and to the extent that certain assets or certain facets of it become viral is always never certain and or can be counted on. So you just hope that happens, but when you can make it happen and the magic occurs, those media impressions do create impact on sales and or building consumer awareness and or customer loyalty. And this slide is showing you when you can get your campaign into that earned media place. It's really great because consumers, over 92%, say what they trust most is word of mouth. Recommendations of friends and family above all other forms of advertising are what drive them to make those purchasing decisions and or even what companies they're loyal to. You can see that it's much lower. Consumers trust ads that are paid for much less, although they still do to some extent. And this is because a lot of times these ads are intrusive. Most people will watch a television show or read a magazine for the content, not necessarily the ads, although that there are some notable exceptions, especially in the fashion industry. People will buy magazines for the ads, but for the most part, people feel as though that you are intruding into or interrupting whatever else they want to look at on the internet or on TV or while they're reading. And again, you can see reviews are also something that customers rely on to a great extent, and that would sort of align up with the word of mouth. But what you want to do with social media is get friends and family, people who know each other, talking about it, rather than just paying attention to how you're engaging with your consumers through consumer ratings or feedback. While important, you can get to an even higher level by igniting these conversations within social circles. So this slide shows you paid, owned, and earned media. So this is Nike's Facebook page, which is something that they own. They can upload any content they want to this. You can see in the lower left-hand corner their about video. So this is a video that they've created that allows them to engage with their target audience in the way they would like to. They also have included in Facebook a paid ad. So this is the one you see in the biggest frame to the right here, where they are really trying to tap into current events or even pop culture by attaching their brand to a specific player and or a specific game. So clicking on that video is actually a paid for ad placement that Nike placed onto Facebook. And then anytime you can get customers or your target audience or anybody to engage with any of your paid or owned media, that is earned media. And so earned media would be someone liking or sharing or commenting on any of these things you see on this page. So some key terminology, you may want to stop the slide presentation and take notes, but impressions and actions are important concepts to know and understand. An impression is something that happens every time an ad or any other piece of content appears, whether it is visible or not. So just putting the message in front of somebody counts as an impression. Clicks is when someone actively clicks on the content, and views is when something pops up and is viewed, which can be measured and seen. To what extent are people watching the things you're putting in front of them, and how quickly do they click away from it? Under the just visiting category, you have traffic, visitor, and unique visitor. Traffic is every single visit to the website, and a visit is each session that occurs on a website. So how long do people stay when they come versus how many visits overall have occurred to the website. A visitor is an individual that visits the website, where a unique visitor is just could be one person who visits your website multiple times. So these are all, again, able to be determined, and they all have significant meaning. So overall traffic is helpful to know how many people are visiting. You have to drill down and see, is it a few people visiting a ton of times, or many different people visiting only once? Those are ways of analyzing this data that have great impact on strategy. And under the Drive conversions terms, touch point, action, and conversion. So touch point is any contact between a consumer and a business. It can be through pop-up ads. It could be through native content that pops up inside of a news feed or a stream inside of a platform. An action is a marketing touch point that a user initiates, which can be measured and evaluated. So that's when you really notice, oh, this is when we got the user to do something we wanted them to do. And this is also a very valuable metric for people to know, because some of their placements do not result in much action. So being very attuned to what makes your target audience or target consumer take action is something you need to pay particular attention to. And conversion is when a targeted action that an organization wants its website visitors is completed. So when do the actions that you want turn into sort of a completion of a survey, or signing up, or actually buying a product? That's also an extra step, because someone might initiate the action and not actually follow through with the steps you want them to meet your objective. And we can see with the MailChimp ad, a call to action would be the buttons that really ask the consumer to do something. And engagement is where you can see if they actually do the call to action. And also being able to measure the extent to which this is happening, and how it's happening, and where it's happening, and where people came from to visit this ad, and where they leave to after, all are important measures that help you really understand how your target audience engages with your ad. And so this slide shows you the increasingly complex social media landscape. It's impossible to be an expert in all of these areas. When you are working from the client side or the ad agency side, your job is to become an expert with how your target audience engages with all these different platforms and how they connect through and together inside of them. And that helps you not only understand how to reach them, but again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, where in the funnel does your target audience show up at, and at what point in the funnel do they show up in certain specific places in their social media landscape? Again, this is just as much an art as it is a science, and the more you know about each platform, the better. And for advertising's sake, knowing what the culture and or the haptics or the way the platform is used really matters a lot as in terms of how you deliver your ad content. So assuming you can just create one ad campaign that will run the same on Facebook as it will on Twitter, as it will on Instagram, as it will on Snapchat is a very bad way of thinking about things, because the users of those platforms engage differently with paid, owned, and earned media that shows up on those places. All right, so also you can see again when each of the major social media platforms we use today have been invented, and this sort of shows you how quickly users have engaged with them. It's an extraordinary explosion that allows companies to engage with their target audience in ways that were unimaginable before the advent of digital media. And again, we can see how social media makes it even more possible to know where in the purchasing funnel your target audience is, and also really understand how they engage with your ads at different stages of the buying process. And again, mastering all of them is a lifelong effort. And when you do, a new one may be introduced and another one may die away. So it is an ever-changing landscape. But knowing which ones are the most popular is important, because obviously that is where you want to be reaching people. Where there are more people, there's more potential consumers and more money to be made. So, what is social media? And this is distinct from digital media. Social media is part of a digital media strategy, but the three defining characteristics that distinguish specifically what social media is the social interactivity. It's people interacting with people. The openness and flexibility is another distinguishing characteristic. Just about anybody can go on any of these platforms, and there's many different ways for advertisers to engage with their target audience within each platform. And it's a third distinguishing factor is the fast-paced flow of information. People will go through their streams very, very quickly. So having an ad campaign with a 4, 5, 6, 7 minute video is probably not going to work on many platforms. You just are not going to be able to hold people's attention for very long at all. Social interactivity, going back to the first one, thinking about these things. Can people and how do people communicate with each other on the platform is important to consider. How is this changing the way we socialize with friends, family, coworkers, and peers? So each platform has its own characteristics in that way as well. Certain platforms young people would never invite their family on, and others they use specifically for their family, for instance, and that's a thing to be aware of and know. Sharing experience with thousands of connections you've created with people around the world is impossible without social media. So this is something else that advertisers and marketers can get to know very quickly, how people are using their product or brand. And again, trying to create ad campaigns that inspire people to share, literally share, and or engage people in conversation around is always the goal, because that earned media that flows out of your paid and owned strategies is invaluable. The second of the third criteria, again, openness and flexibility. Here are some considerations to keep in mind. So as I said earlier, the openness implies that all people can participate, and mostly for many of them that is true. Perhaps from even a too young of age, many people can be on many of these platforms and interact with each other. The openness has two sides is another important consideration. Can people initiate conversations and have a back and forth conversation? And how easy is it and how quickly can that be done? And people can make themselves open to social interactions or not. So some people can block on some platforms a lot more than on others. And same thing with interactions with organizations. So, how do you engage people and platforms in such a way where you can increase the chances that they're not going to see you as interrupting them and continue to engage with them? Then the last idea here is flexibility means that social interactions can take place in many formats. And I mentioned this earlier. Within each platform, there are many different ways to engage. The best way is always to make your content native. And this is discussed in chapter 1 of your book, Jab, 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 Right Hook, more extensively. But the idea is that you want to have your product placement show up not with a specific ask, but how do you engage your target audience in such a way where they don't view your ad or your communication with them as an interruption? It's something that they accept more readily when you show a little more concern for them as an individual, or you show a connection to the community that they're engaging in conversations with. Again, the third consideration for social media is the fast pace of the flow of information. So people can rapidly spread your ad or your communication to them. As you know, this is both good and bad because something that's negative can travel probably just as fast, if not faster, as something funny or cute or emotionally triggering. So, the idea here is that social media is a very powerful tool and will allow you to spread information very quickly. And just to be aware of how that can be good and bad is very important. Information flows on social media can be either one-to-one or one-to-many. So people can talk to each other through private messaging or for instance, in Facebook Messenger, it's more of a one-to-one conversation, although people can talk in groups that they create, or they can, on their flow, broadcast to the whole world or just their whole group of friends. So knowing how those functionalities work within each platform is very important to consider because it might change how you interact with a person in your ad and what calls to action you make and when you even make them. And this last thought here we have already discussed. So information spreads much faster when transmitted via one-to-many. Obviously, that makes sense. So if someone's going to share something on their Facebook page and make it public, obviously that spreads much further than if they were to do a one-to-one chat or messenger communication. So, what's the problem here? So you may hear a lot, whether in the company side or the agency side, oh, we need to be on Facebook or we need to be having a strategy for Snapchat. You want to really think about how your target audience engages with all the variety of social media mix that they have in their own lives. And so relying on one channel for any particular purpose is not a very smart way to do it. You have to really think about how these things all connect. So, for instance, if you have a Tumblr campaign, you may want to be very artsy and splashy about it, but you may know that to get people to really engage with the product, maybe you want that same campaign to show up in a feed in Facebook that then leads to a Tumblr ad. So people may not ever go directly to Tumblr. So you need to know how do the people who you're trying to sell to engage with your message in the way you want them to engage with it. So things flow back and forth through these platforms, and knowing how your target audience uses media, and not only how they use it, but how they use it in the stage of their purchasing cycle or the funnel that they're in is also very important to figure out. Your first reading assignment is to read chapters 1 and 2 of Jab, 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 Right Hook by Gary Vaynerchuk. This is where you're going to get a lot of your ideas to advise your client that you pick for your project work. So again, we're asking you to go out into the world and find a business owner who uses social media to promote their business. They should be willing to add you to their Facebook page as an administrator or a manager, not an owner, but an administrator. This will allow you to see how they use the media, and you're going to be adding tools to your analysis from Facebook Blueprint, the Ads Manager, and Hootsuite Academy. So your self-study work with those assignments is very important, as well as this reading, which will help you advise your clients as to how they're using social media and give them recommendations that they may want to employ. Also, it will help you give them information about what is working for them and what might not be working as well as they hoped it would. But Chapter 1 we'll review how social media blended into digital marketing. We went over that pretty extensively in this presentation, but it goes deeper into storytelling best practices. So how do you create a story for your brand that can then be turned into ad placements in a variety of ways that really match your consumers' interests, so then it doesn't break their attention and enjoyment with whatever platform that they're engaging with, and it might even actually accentuate it and make that experience even better. Chapter 2 goes into the characteristics of great content and compelling stories. So here are 6 areas in which you really want to understand how social media is being used specifically for your client. In this course, these are great talking points for them. Is it native? So are they actually creating content that's native to the platform that they are advertising on? So there are examples in the book, but one big example is if you are creating content-heavy ads that appear in people's news feeds, it's very unlikely anyone's taking the time to stop and read all of that because people stream through their news feeds very quickly. Is it interrupting them? So that is, there are a bunch of banner ads popping up in people's faces. If people feel like they're being interrupted, they will tune you out or even block you. And then 3, is it making demands often? So jab, 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 right hook. It's a boxing metaphor. The idea is that you don't always try to throw a big heavy punch every time you are delivering your message here. You're trying to create small little jabs to build consumer awareness, to create brand loyalty, or to create emotions or feelings that are positive that people might attach to the brand. So you're not always asking them to click on something to buy something every time you interact with them. But you do have to eventually get to that point somewhere, so knowing how to build up to it and then do it is very important. So there's tips in the book about that. And then the last 3, leveraging pop culture. Is it micro and is it consistent and self-aware? Really speaks to how well you know your target audience, and are you interacting with them in such a way that will grab their attention, make them feel as though you are aware of who they are, and also do you talk to them as though you're human beings, or are you some corporate entity that has everything built into programmatic buying who really does not care about them as a consumer? So again, look for those tips. Looking ahead, your first 3 things to do is to submit your syllabus confirmation on Canvas. Select into a group for your strategic consulting presentation by the 11th, and get started with Facebook Blueprint modules. So you will need to log in and sort of get used to what that looks like. There are many modules, and they're sort of organized in sort of weird, strange ways in Facebook, but you'll see links to the modules that I would like you to engage in on a weekly basis, and please do those as stated in the course syllabus, or else you're going to get behind very quickly. Thank you. If you have any questions, please call me, email me, or message me on Canvas. And also see at the end of this slide presentation are many more terms to know. Take a look at the list and see which ones you may not be familiar with and look them up. Thank you and good luck this quarter.